why don't we start by getting on the same page about what doomerism is? So, as briefly and simply as I can put it, I would say doomerism is a pattern of thinking and an emotional state that we can get into when we excessively inundate ourselves with news and content that goes on about the state of the world, how horrible things are, how everything is falling apart, how society and the environment are collapsing. And when we're just constantly saturating ourselves in this kind of information, it can lead to a hopelessness and a despair, which is natural, but then that over time can kind of harden into a shell of cynicism, and it can lead us to be stagnant in life. And whereas news of what's happening in the world should motivate us to take, positive and effective action to make things better, doomerism is kind of just throwing our hands up in the air and saying, well, everything's just hopeless, so what's the point in even trying? Doomerism actually does have its roots in a very positive impulse. It is good to be informed. We need to be aware of our circumstances so that we can effectively plan and move forward in a way that is beneficial to ourselves, our communities, and the world at large. And the thing is, no one has a crystal ball. We can't tell the future. But scientific predictions have been reasonably accurate. Climate models, all of this kind of thing, have proven to be a fairly reliable indicator of how things are progressing and how we can expect them to continue to progress over the coming decades. And so it's prudent for us to pay attention to all of this kind of thing, to be aware. And based on the information that we have, we can absolutely expect to see, increases in natural disasters, food system insecurity, fresh water shortage, increased pandemics, economic instability, mass migrations due to climate change, increased depression because of that, and on and on and on. There are just so many different elements to this whole situation. Now, it's not only valid, but essential for us to face all of the emotions that this kind of stuff raises in us. The depression, the anger, the grief, and to be present with ourselves and to take care of ourselves, to take time away from the news and all of that kind of thing. And we can't sustain any kind of positive momentum into the future if we are completely burned out and we're completely hopeless. See, our emotions exist as signals to tell us what's important, what we value, what needs to be changed. Just as hunger tells us that we need to eat, all of this grief and anger and despair, it tells us that the circumstances we're facing are in fact significant and that we do need to do something about it. However, we need to be wary of letting these emotions turn us hard or walled off, or letting them get us into patterns of numbing and dissociating from the world and from ourselves. Cynicism is a way of shielding ourselves from the painful feelings, yeah, but in so doing, it also shields us from our own humanity, and it's a way of abandoning our responsibility to ourselves and to the world at large. A way of saying, well, everything's fucked. There's nothing we can do about it, so why bother even trying? It's true that we as individuals and communities can't solve all of the world's problems, but there's a lot that we can do. Things just aren't that black and white. And cynicism, it doesn't help anything. It just makes us part of the problem. Now, I'm not hating on cynical people. I was that way for a long, long time myself. And it really does take a lot of strength and maturity to look at all of the overwhelming problems in the world and decide to intentionally lean into hope and idealism against all odds, and to commit yourself to being a force for good and for healing, for growth, for creativity, and for love in the world. So, if you identify as a doomer or a cynic, and you feel like you'd like to kind of shift your direction or your perspective and live a life that is full of creativity and hope and passion and purpose, What can you do about it? Well, the first thing I would recommend is to be very mindful of the content that you consume and the news that you consume. Just as the food we eat makes up our body, the information that we consume makes up our mind. So, you're probably aware that there's a huge negativity bias, in human psychology generally, but especially in the news. Bad news sells. When people are afraid and desperate, you can kind of manipulate them into doing anything. So when we follow the news, the mainstream news especially, all we see is negativity. All we see is the bad things in the world. But while there are bad things happening in the world, there are lots of bad things happening in the world. There is also a lot of positive. There's a lot of beauty in the world. There are a lot of people working to make the world a better place. There's a lot of progress actually being made. So while you might have to be a bit more intentional in seeking it out, I'd encourage you to spend some time actually seeking out and consuming good news. And, that doesn't mean that the bad stuff isn't happening, but it gives you a bit more of a balanced diet for your mind. There's also a lot of material, a lot of content out there by people and for people who are making the world a better place, who are taking action, and who are engaging in community, who are engaging in activism and all this kind of thing. And spending time consuming that kind of stuff can be very encouraging and can really boost your morale. So I find that very helpful, and I'd encourage you to try that as well if you haven't. Next, I'd encourage you to take time regularly to do things that nourish you physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So these are, everything from making sure that you're getting good sleep, and I'm a chronic insomniac, I know how hard that is, but, try as hard as you can and do as much as you can to get good rest. That's probably the most important thing. Eat nutritious food, get good exercise on a regular basis, move your body every day. Try to find some amount of community. I'm a very introverted, so, being a social butterfly isn't necessary, but have at least a couple deep, meaningful bonds with people in your life who you can connect to, who understand you, who share your values. That's incredibly important. Art and creativity. Creativity is one of the main things that makes us human, so this is one of the main ways we can feed ourselves emotionally, spiritually. Spending time in nature, obviously, for me, that's a huge one, and I think for a lot of people it is. And there are other things too. Hobbies that kind of take us out of the more serious and difficult aspects of living. Maybe you're into sports or any of that kind of thing. And these are ways that we can really nourish ourselves, replenish our energy, and kind of stoke our lust for life, which can easily be depleted when we're just surrounded by bad news all the time. And finally, if it feels like an option, I'd recommend looking into therapy or coaching potentially if it's the right kind of coaching. I have to give the caveat here that not all therapists are tuned into things like climate grief or, feelings that are based more in unsolvable global issues and that kind of thing. It's worth taking the time to find somebody to talk to who understands these things, who works with an anti-oppressive approach, somebody who is informed in these kinds of things. And this is, I guess, where I can throw in my plug. I actually am a licensed counselor and a certified coach as well. And I work with people on these kinds of things. So if that's something you're interested in, my website is listed in the description, and there are other ways of finding me as well. Now, all of this being said, I want to affirm that staying positive and engaged is not always easy, and it's not always possible. Sometimes we really do need to step back, slow down, and take care of ourselves, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when the time comes that we feel ready, maybe not 100% ready, but ready enough, and that's something only you can judge, it's so important that we pull ourselves back up and re-engage with the world. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help if you need help to do this. We are not meant to go through life alone. See, humans need purpose to thrive. We're meaning-making animals, and without meaning and without purpose in our lives, we really flounder, and this is really when we fall into doomerism and hopelessness. To really live fulfilling, rich, and meaningful lives, we do need to stay more or less consistently aligned with our truth and with our purpose. So I'd be interested to hear what you think and what keeps you going. If you find yourself falling into a bit of a doomer cycle or into cynicism, what gives you hope for the world? What inspires you to keep going? And that's really all I have for the moment. So thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you like, and I'll see you in the next one.